Hello, greetings all. We have arrived to the second part of the video that we've been, or the topic that we've been developing. And if you are watching this video for the first time, it's important that you go back and watch the first part where we were discussing exactly what we see on the screen right now. Society, the governments, the factions, the organizations here side by side. We have the media, education, religions, the international organizations that give the guidelines under which the governments of nations function and should govern or should be governing by. On top of that, we have the foundations or the NGOs. Which are the ones who do the research regarding the different areas where the international organizations take place or govern. And on top of them, we spoke about having corporations, the mega corporations. Which we're talking about all the industry that moves and rules all over the world, and that's all over the world. And from there, we got to speak about the global control of resources. And finally, we closed or concluded that first video, observing how all these corporations that have the global control of the resources are controlled or ruled by very few, the elite few. And now in this second part, we will see what happens or who is at the top, who's on top of this pyramid. Because we saw the first part, all this, it's very important to understand what's coming. We have to understand all these different functions of the lower levels, and to understand who really controls and rules the world. So it is important for us, if you haven't seen that first video, for you to watch it. So with that, let us get in. So now let us start to see who are the entities or organizations that make up the next part of this structure of the government. This next level that we're going to find is the global economic control. So in this current stage of life, of the world where we live in society, in the 21st century, the world moves and exists through the economy. So whoever controls the economy really controls the entire world, right? This economic control is held by different factions which move the global economy, and which in the last 100 years or so, there have been different organizations designed to this end. So it is important for us to understand now in this part how money moves, how the economy moves, how the economic power is structured, and how it applies, or how we can see it practically in our life today. So the first level we will see here is the Federal Reserve, or in other words, all of the national banks, all of the sovereign banks understand that this includes each nation's national bank. Colombian National Bank, Mexican National Bank or Federal Reserve, the U.S. Federal Reserve or National Bank. It's called different names in different countries. These banks or these reserves are not the ones who control the economy of these nations. There are entities above them which are something called the supranational banks. These are way bigger banks from where huge loans are done or given out to each Federal Reserve or each national bank of each country. This is a very condensed portion or amount of very few banks that are enormous. These supranational banks receive money. They're in charge of that money that is received from the world banks, which we will see in a moment. So these banks in turn dispense money out to the national banks in each country, which are in turn the banks that we all use and we all utilize in our daily life. There are four entities which are very important, which are global entities, which were created in the last 70 to 80 years with the purpose of controlling all of the different phases of the economy or sectors or regions of the economy that are controlled worldwide. Almost all of these four entities are a result of the First World War and also as a result of the Second World War. Coming out of these wars, the world itself and as a whole saw the need to unify in a way the countries. Before this, every country was more sovereign, and obviously because there were these masters on top, it wasn't convenient to have all these countries being broken up, and the purpose or their focus, their goal has always been to control the global economy, with the end goal being that all the whole world, every country in the world would use one coin, one currency, and that won't happen under the current economy as it is today. So first we have the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF. This is where all of the global interest rates come from, and from where we also get all of the monetary politics, which rules all of the national banks across the world. This, what does this mean? It means that all of our countries, the majority of the countries, the United States, England, Spain, Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela, they all submit, and to the all these countries submit to the norms or the policies determined by this IMF, by this organization. This makes it so that the people, the person who is at the head of these organizations has a lot of power. These people at their hands a lot of control of how the world economy is going to play out and and where it's heading. Here on the other side, we have the World Trade Organization. So whereas the IMF gives all the guidelines as to how the economy and money and currency should play out all over the world, well, the WTO, or the World Trade Organization, gives all of the guidelines as far regarding trade or commerce all over the world. From there, there is where they determine how commerce and trade, international trade is going to play out, and all the policies therein, which includes all the international trade treaties. And then finally, we have here the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and World Trade Organization. They are very similar entities. They are designed so that each one is in charge of a different aspect of the world economy. So let's pause for a moment and try to understand where we are right now in this whole diagram. So in the previous video, in part 1, we had stopped at this under corporations and said or observed that the corporations have the global control of resources. And we said that those corporations have owners, and those owners are only but a few. We did an exercise where we saw just one of those corporations, mega corporations, and which has very few owners. That corporation owned a plethora of different sub-brands or sub-corporations, and essentially it creates a monopoly where these families or these people, these persons who have all this control, one would say these are the masters of the world if they control all the whole economy or industry. And then we see here that we have these economic organizations, which are in turn the ones who give the guidelines to these corporations as far as money and currency is concerned. They trace the paths for those corporations to navigate through and walk upon. They also set all the policies so that these corporations can also navigate within a legal sphere. So at this moment we could say, okay, well, these four international trade or these world banks our organizations are the ones who control the economy in the world. But it just so happens that all of these monetary organizations, which have the global control of the economy, are actually owned by those families, those few families that actually also own the mega corporations. So the ones who create the laws and the policies are the same ones who own the prisons, in a way to speak. And of course, this is beyond what a lot of the masses or a lot of common people are aware of. Of course, these organizations all are set up and show themselves and present themselves to the world as organizations which are placed and are made and structured in a way that is fair, or are made with the values of the world and of the economy, which makes it hard for anybody or a lot of us to stop and question ourselves. Well, why is it that the owners of these corporations are also the owners of these mega world banks, super international banks? And not just that, but that they also are the ones who are in charge of, or are the ones who place the presidents, the people at the head of these organizations, these world monetary organizations. So what we're seeing and what we're understanding as we're observing this is that these families hold in their hands the absolute power, and it is absolute because they control absolutely everything. So what could be on top of this? Well, we say, okay, well, we see the control of the resources, we see the global control of the economy, because we could think that this is the very top, the very elite or top level of power, but no, it just so turns out that there are other entities, other agents on top of this level. Everything we've seen up to now is known to a lot of us, maybe to a few of us at the higher levels. They talk about it in the news. We have seen the president of the IMF come out and do some declarations or make some statements to the world. We normally also see the statements by the presidents of the World Trade Organization. Up to there, we don't have a problem. We understand this structure. Maybe not the same way we're seeing it in this video or understanding it in this video, but in a very different way, which is the way that the news and the media, the mass media, presents it and portrays it. So what is above? Above this, we will find some entities of power. Now, we're not talking about entities which are normally accepted worldwide or in a way socially accepted or recognized. Socially recognized. A part of the entities that we will see here at their moment were made and functioned throughout a long time without anybody knowing about them. And when somebody would come out to speak about these organizations, of course they would be called a conspirator or a conspiracy theorist. And for many decades, for many years, whenever these organizations were talked about, again, it was only seen as a conspiracy. And when we talk about conspiracy, we always understand that these are, conspiracy theories, usually made by fanatics or radicals or people who want to look at the bad side or the negative side of everything, or people who antagonize or satanize people who are, who make money, people who are in the elite number of people who make money in the world. So all of that became included. Rich people also became included into, or talking about rich people also became included in that little box of conspiracy theories. And they, of course, many of them became very popular to the point where now, up to now in today's day and age, if you look up in Wikipedia and just look up conspiracy theories, you will see a plethora of different subjects, which in turn, anybody who, any one of us who decide to search or research any of these topics that we're talking about and goes to Wikipedia and sees these under conspiracy theories, will say, well, hey, I looked up these subjects, and what this guy here on this video is talking about is just conspiracy theories. It's just a theory. It's not anything real. These are just fanatical lies. If that is true, then we would have to ask ourselves who made Wikipedia or who invented Wikipedia. Have you ever asked yourself that? Or even more, what is Wikipedia? Wikipedia? Well, it turns out it just turns out that it is a foundation which was created by an individual, a random person or individual who basically, they make websites, just like founder, Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, which became one of the hugest websites. But it turns out now Wikipedia is one of the 6 largest or most visited websites in the world. And who can publish on Wikipedia? Anybody, everybody. I can go into Wikipedia and write a definition about what is a conspiracy theory, or I can go in there and define or make a statement or paragraph about the IMF, even though it's already been covered. Well, I can go in there and look for a theme or a topic that hasn't been covered. I simply just have to look at the guidelines of and the requirements for what is required to write an entry into Wikipedia. And for those who might not be aware, Wikipedia is the largest online encyclopedia in the world. Many times when any one of us research or search something on Google, usually the first search or the first result will be from Wikipedia. The fact that it is a foundation and it functions as a foundation, the money that goes into Wikipedia is supported by the same families that have the economic control of the world would be very conspiratorial, but it is the reality. What can we do? So here in this part, we're going to find something that is called or is known the round table. The round table, also known as the think tank, or in other words, we could see it as the great brain from where all these factions, all these mythologies, all these paths from where are planned, are thought out, all of the entities of control that take place in the world. In this level of the pyramid, we have all the brilliant minds, not only just the brilliant minds, but it's included at least 6 organizations, which are the most representative. There are others we can include, but we will focus on these. So some of them we will include here. We have, for example, the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission was founded in 1973. It is a private organization, and it was founded by David Rockefeller. This was formed or founded parallel to another one, which is the Bilderberg Group, which is one that maybe might be better known because worldwide, because of the type of meetings that have been held throughout history, which were very private meetings, very secretive meetings, very confidential meetings, where to these meetings of the Bilderberg Group, the presidents of the most important companies in the world would assist or would be invited. Presidents of the media, the mass media, would be invited. Presidents of important nations. What did they do in these meetings? And from there we get the commission, the Trilateral Commission. They would plan. They would simply plan for the following year. These meetings were done once a year, annually. So for example, if in the following year after the meeting they needed to focus on all the mass media or the social networks, well, then it would be obviously important for them to invite the heads or the leaders of Facebook, of Google, of Twitter, of YouTube, and they became regulars to these kinds of meetings. And so it just so happens that in 1972, in their annual meeting of 1972 of the Bilderberg Group, where one of the prominent or the main main organizers, which was David Rockefeller, well, that's when he proposed that they should have another commission or a trilateral commission from where they could handle a perspective of the things that they would speak about in the Bilderberg Group, how they could project that into the world, so that the world could be a better or more prosperous place, and to live in peace, according or to what they said or what they claimed. Actually, in the beginning, the initial name was International International Commission of Peace and Prosperity, and then it was changed. The name was changed to Trilateral Commission. There we also find the Organization of the United Nations. Careful to what I'm about to say. It doesn't mean that every organization that is here in this group was made under the shadows or secretly. A lot of them, yes, but they're not here in this level because they are secret or anonymous organizations. They are in this level because they are from where everything is planned and organized of how the world works today. And the United Nations, obviously, after the Second World War, there was a need to unify the world or the nations to not have the same problems or conflicts. And in this organization, obviously, many of the presidents worldwide take place or form a part of this coalition. And let's understand this: presidents are not the ones who govern really their countries. They are the face, the representation to their countries and to the world of what would be a dictionary or a governor. But as we saw in the previous video and in this video we've seen, they follow very strict guidelines that come from above them. And it's not like every president knows that their leader or their master are the Rockefellers or the Rothschild. No, it doesn't function quite like that. There might be, of course, there might have been presidents that get to power, get to be presidents, and become very anti-elite or anti-families who govern the world. And there are presidents like this who get to power not by the powers above, but they get to be there. They get to become presidents, as is the example of one of these presidents that did not belong to or was owned by any one of these groups, which was the case in the United States, for example, with President Kennedy. There are lots of rumors and lots to say about Kennedy's life, but the most important is that he ended up being assassinated. Of course, that could be another topic for another video to observe entirely. They didn't last long in office, but because, of course, he did not want to submit to the powers above him. And, of course, we know the outcome of that and what took place. Okay, next, we have also the Council on Foreign Relations. What does this mean? Well, from here, they meet all... This is where they invite all of the presidents and leaders which are placed under these other lower levels. So they sit them down in a table and they're told, okay, sirs, the foreign relations are going to be handled this and that way and this way. So go back to your organizations and create all of the right guidelines so that in turn you can go back and to your countries and teach the leaders in those countries, the sub-leaders below you, how this is going to play out. So now let's take a look at the Bilderberg Group, which we were talking about before. It is called Bilderberg because the Bilderberg Hotel was the first place where they met. It is an estimated number of 100 leaders and invited. And as the years have passed, now they send delegates from their leaders, because obviously previously this Bilderberg Group was seen as a conspiracy, secretive group, and it became a problem because people would go, people who would get the information about the meetings would go, and they would try to take pictures of the people attending. And of course, no newspaper or journal would want to publish those pictures that were taken of these meetings. So there would be these people with pictures of presidents of countries meeting with presidents of different companies, of different organizations, and they would in turn take this, like for example, to the New York Times or or the Washington Post or any well-known newspaper or journal. and would say, here, I have proof, or I have pictures, very compromising pictures. Of course, all these newspapers belong to these families in turn, to these very same people. So obviously, these would never come out, except for alternative media. But with the rise of the internet and the social media, with the rise of social media as well, there was, in the beginning of the 90s, or at the end of the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s, there was a lot of persecution, or a lot of censorship of the social medias or of the internet, where it wasn't necessary to go to the New York Times or the Washington Post to sell the pictures, because they would simply put them up on a blog, and the conspirators of those years would say, hey, look, here's a list of the names, here's pictures of the people who assisted these meetings. And finally, it was so popular and so well known, there was no way of denying it there was no way of denying it. But then from these groups, from these very same meetings, and careful with what I'm about to say, because from these people, from these same groups, from these same meetings, they instructed or made up organizations in charge of infiltrating the internet and generating content about all these things, all these topics, and worded in a way that makes all these subjects seem like conspiracy. So these are made to seem with the intention of making people see, when they see this, it's just conspiracy theory, this is just fanatics, these are just radical people. And in this way, they kind of form a anti-information, or double information. So there is a game, counterintelligence, in the internet, in the web, which is very hard for the normal person or the common person to differentiate between what is right, what is true, what is wrong, what is the things that are published like people like us, or what is published by those groups that they have created with the intent of bringing confusion to all of these topics as it is. So finally, the people and the families that met in the Bilderberg Group, about 100 people, there came to a point where they couldn't simply say, they had been for years saying that it was false, until they just made it very open. These meetings were never covered by any serious or mass media news channel or newspaper. So it became officially presented to the world as a meeting where they plan what is the best plans for the world and for peace and for prosperity. And in reality, this is not the real case. These meetings are made in order to plan how to control the world and how to control society. Next, we also have the Club of Rome, which was founded around 1968. And we have to be careful here, because we have to understand what is Rome. And when we talk about Rome, who is Rome? Rome is not the papacy or the Vatican. Is bigger than that. If we connect this to the prophetic scriptures, which, for example, were talked about or were given by the prophet Daniel, in his visions or in his prophecies, the last empire was Rome. And there were no other empires after that one, if that is the final empire. But the Roman Empire ended in around the year 476 AD, or it is supposed that it ended, that's how the story is told. But we have to verify that story. What happened was that Rome was really divided, but the empire never stopped. It transformed. It stopped being a military empire to become a religious empire. And the power was not imposed by the government, but by religion. And that's where religion goes in. And we have to remember what we said in the first video, in the first part of this series, when we covered about religion, how they created it to control the masses. Again, and then we covered it in the last video, religion, not faith. Religions are made to control the world, but the faith is what we believe, what we have inside of us regarding God. Anyway, the Club of Rome has this name of course, being an organization which was created in Rome. If you look it up on Wikipedia, for example, it'll say that it was created by a very small group of scientists and politicians, okay? And again, Wikipedia is interesting, or it's funny, because it'll tell you the truth, but it's very appealing, or in a way that's very, it seems very nice, very beautiful, like everything's okay. But in reality, the scientists and the politicians that created this group were the same ones that we've been talking about, the same families that we have been talking about that control everything in the world. And if you do just a light research about who the scientists that were involved in this group of Rome, you will see that these were not people who were driven by benevolent or good motives. These were people who had very detailed pasts, resumes, and even spoke of social engineering. And finally, we have here the Royal Institute of International Affairs. This is also known as the Chatham House, simply from where all of the international policy affairs are handled, from where all of the guidelines of how the international affairs will function. For example, from where they plan how the relations between China and the United States will be handled. And they have deceived us, and we see it all over the news, that China and the United States are involved in a commercial war or a trade war. And I ask you to question, are they really involved in a trade war? Are China and United States, or President Trump and the President of China, the big role players which are in power and that are fighting the world, the trade, fighting for the world economy? When we have already explained and observed that what transcurs and what happens economically in the world comes from above the presidents. So how the world really functions economically is handled from this level of the pyramid, from the Council on Foreign Relations and from the Institute, the Royal Institute of International Relations or Affairs, is where we get all of the policy of how the world economy will work and how the relationships between countries will work. What we see in the media is what they need us to see. But in reality, all of this is organized from these spheres, really high spheres, from these very small, these 6 groups, organizations, where the most powerful people in the world meet year after year of how the economy is going to work. How are we going to use China? Who's going to be in the stage, in the world stage? How will they move their pawns, their pieces, which are economic and political? Let us not be deceived by believing everything that the media offers us of how these affairs work. This is completely removed of how it is truly. Again, it is designed to show what they want us to understand or what they want us to believe about how the world works. But it is planned from long ago. It is because of this that even though they're supposed to be in this tension or great trade war, that we still see them drinking coffee and drinking tea and shaking hands, and maybe they'll sometimes say a strong statement, because of course they must maintain the theater that they have to maintain in front of us, because they cannot discredit what the media has built, so that we can all continue to believe that there is a big problem here, a big conflict, and of course the conflict will result in whoever can launch the 5G finally. Let's look at this example. For a year, they've been trying to show us this war between China and the United States because of China trying to introduce Huawei, and how Trump has stood firm and has said no, they won't come in here, and he put supposedly tariffs on China to prevent China from taking repercussions and affecting the economy between China and the United States. They've been telling us that for a year. And then recently, this is in May 15th of 2020, we saw how the United States planned along with China how the introduction of the 5G network will happen in the United States, and how Huawei would be the leading company leading the 5G network or introducing the 5G network in the United States. You can research about this news. And some of us see this in front of our TVs and we're like, oh, finally they were able to fix their relationships. I'm so glad that they came to an agreement. Thank God. And they manipulate us, and they had the world waiting because of this crisis, or waiting to see how it would be resolved. And now they are working together to see how they will introduce the 5G, and we will cover this future video, or specifically speaking of the 5G and what is behind this, because there's a lot of info and data about this, but we have to see what is behind this. And we have to see that. I want to show you that this is a tip of the iceberg. You cannot imagine how deep this goes. I will share a video, or maybe many very different videos explaining different sections about this, because why control the world with this network, or why do these families want to control for more money? No, money, they don't need more money. They are the masters, rulers of the entire world. So then why? If you already have all the money in the world, your problem is not economic, then why is your intention to control this world? It's something called power, simply power. It's not an economic topic. It's an issue of supremacy, of control, power, which these families in their disgusting minds consumed with power carry. This is why these people carry out things like population control, or things like the sterilization, or things even like the indoctrination of our children, and indoctrinate them into this topic of gender dysphoria, just so that when our kids grow up, they will not want to marry, because they will have no interest in marriage, because it will simply be man with man and women with women. And with something like that, you just have to spend one generation so that the world population drops and decreases in an incredible rate. Because think about it, if in today's world people don't want to have kids and their mascots or their pets are their kids, well, think about how it will be in the future years when these kids will be adults. So anyway, so finally we got to our last level here, which is the think tank, or the brain, right? Which is this is where all the control happens, right? Well, not really. We have more on top of this, or above this. Here we have these. So we have these organizations were designed and created by the next section that we have here, which is the Committee of 300. What is the Committee of the 300? Well, it's the 300 most richest and most influential families, powerful families in the world. So wow, finally we've gotten to the top. No, we have more to go. There is another group which is more narrow, more specific, a lot smaller, of families that govern, or that have power, that influence over these 300 families. These 300 families here are the families which are socially known, like the 300 most or richest families in each country. There are members of these families. Who is above these families? If these are not the ones who are governing, or the masters, how is it possible that we can go up? Well, we still have more to see, which is a smaller group, which is the Crown Council. The Crown Council of 13. Well, These are then the 13 most powerful families which control the world we live in. The 13 families that have planned, that have constituted, that have created the organizations that we found here. These organizations were created by these 13 families specifically. If they are created by these 13 families, these organizations are the ones which give the counsel to all of these other organizations which have the global economic control. And so if we keep going, we find out, or we figure that all of society is controlled by these 13 families. We are a society of about 7.9 billion people, which is controlled by these 13 families. I have researched a lot. There's many years that I have researched. I had the opportunity to live in Germany, where this whole topic is a lot more open or more received. These topics in Germany are not conspiracy. They speak about it as table topics, which are normal. The 2 years that I spent there allowed me to see it from a different perspective, and also to see that up to this point, the majority of people who like to research deep into these topics get up to this point. But what I want to tell you is that even above these families, there are more powers, there are more masters. And observe or careful, because this is very connected to the scriptural prophecies. Okay? Think about this, for example. When the Messiah was tempted by the enemy, what did the enemy tell him? He said, bow before me, and I will give you the government, or the governing, the rule of all the nations. What does that mean? That in the hands of Satan, of the enemy, is the govern or the rule of all the nations, and that he gives that to whoever he wants. And one would say, whoa, wait a minute, because biblically the world belongs to the Creator. Well, I would say then, wait, because the scriptures are also clear and tell us that this world, this universe that belongs to the Creator, but it just so happens, yes, he controls the universe and the world, but God gave this society, this world, gave the authority, the governing, the rule to the enemy to govern. All of the prophecies have to come true till the end of times. What does these end times prophecies consist of? Well, that the conditions will come where God will judge the nations. This judgment is necessary because God has to have judgment. He has to have justice. In this way, it allows the enemy to govern. This is how, if the enemy told our Messiah to bow before him and he will give him the power of all the nations, it means that whoever bows, the people in power, who have a lot of power, who have a lot of influence, who bow before the enemy gives them in recompense, they make an agreement, a covenant, where it is the very Satan, the very enemy, governing the nations to his pleasing, with the very intent of destroying humanity. So who are the families who are involved in the Council of 13? They are placed here in alphabetical order. It's not by order of who's more powerful. We have the Astor family, Bundy, Collins, DuPont, Freeman, Kennedy, the Lee, the Onassis family, the Reynolds, Rockefeller, Rothschild or Warburg, and the Windsor. I will say something. It is the truth, and it's needed I need to say this because it's going to clarify some things. If you look at these, if you observe these names, these 13 families who are the most powerful, there is something that they have in common, which is that 90% of them are Jewish families. How is it possible that the 13 most powerful families, the majority of them are of Jewish descent? Aren't the Jewish people the ones through whom salvation will come? Aren't the Jewish people supposed to be God's people? Here it is very important, very necessary for us to understand something. And that is that there are two types of Jewish. First we have the Jewish, the person that is descendant of Abraham and Jacob, descendant of the patriarchs, the Hebrew patriarchs, and the Jewish, and then there is the Khazar Jew. And this will be part of another video. Historically, we will see how the Vatican, through the Jesuits, they took a group of people, or they took converts from a nation called Khazar, and they were taken and trained by the Vatican to become economic administrators. And what does that mean? This is vital and important, because if not, given that we see that all of this filth of families that is found at this level, that has so much power and does so much damage to the world, that they are Jewish, there is a danger or a tendency to become anti-Semitic, which means that you become a person who hates the Jewish people or the Jewish culture. And from the people of Israel, everything comes from there. From there we get the scriptures, we get the Messiah, we get the patriarchs, we get the salvation. But let us not confuse the blood, the Jewish blood, with these false Jewish people, which are placed in power. And from there, I will go ahead of my future videos to say, I will tell you that this is not the head of the serpent, this is not the head of power. There is somebody above of them. And that's why I was saying before that I have been researching this topic for many, many years. And all of the research and all of the other people always stop here. And they are not aware that, or it's not common to know that there are powers above these 13 families. And it is not the Vatican. There is somebody who also controls the Vatican. And in the following video, that's why you cannot miss it, in the next video we will explain very detailed how the Vatican enters into this equation. Where is the Vatican? We didn't cover it in this segment or in the last one, but we know that they do have power. How much power? What is the role of the Vatican in all of this? What is the role of the Masons, of the Illuminati? There is not a way today in 2021 to say that that's conspiracy. That is not conspiracy. It might have been conspiracy 10 or 15 years ago when people would mention Masons or Illuminati and everybody else would react by saying, no, you're fanatic, you're radical. Today, there is no way of ignoring the facts. There is so much evidence, so much information that the Masons themselves, even the news channels even talk about it. They have made documentaries explaining what is Masonry, but be careful, because these the documentaries are made by the History Channel, which belongs to these very people, these very families. So these channels will say that, or explain what is a Mason, explained by them, so designed so that you understand and believe what they want you to believe of what is a Mason or what is an Illuminati. I hope I make myself clear. The best that you can do if you want to understand what is a Mason, or the Crown Council of the 13, or a Khazar Jew, is go to the convention. Do not go to the conventional venues or the conventional news channels, because they will only tickle your ears. They will tell you the fictitious history. These powerful families are the ones which control the world. These 13 families, they are on paper, the owners of all the corporations of the world. They are the owners of the great companies and industries, pharmaceuticals of the world. These families, these laboratories belong to these families who are the ones who portray this race to in the race to come out with the vaccine for this thing that's going around, which it really doesn't matter which company gets there, because if it's X or if it's Y, well, it belongs to the same families. So I hope that it's clear where we're going and where we are heading with this. Do not miss the next video. If this one was good, the next one will be even better, because in the next one we will have or cover how how parallel to all this structure that we have seen and explained, how the Vatican functions. There's something that's called there is something called the Order of Malta. These are red-dressed men. Usually people do not have any idea who they are and what their role is, and the important role that the power that this institution has, and the history that this order has. This is the modern version, or the modern version of the Templars. And we will also explore how the secret societies, which are not so secret anymore, play into this topic as well. Which we will see 4 institutes. We won't call them secret societies because they are not secret anymore. We cannot talk anymore about secret societies or occult societies, because they are occult, but Wikipedia or the Google will tell us or sell it to us like they're not occult. It will tell us that the occult is only a conspiracy theory. I hope that you can understand the sarcasm that I'm handling, but we will see how these institutions enter into this equation. How do the Illuminati function? What is the role of the Masons? The Masons and the Illuminati are they a different group besides the 13 families, or is it the group that governs them? I will tell you from now that it's not. We also have another group, which is the Skull and Bones with the 322. Movies are full of the 322, and then finally we will also cover the Rosicrucian Order, or the Rosy Cross, which is the last symbol there. I think the next video will be very interesting. Please do not miss it. It is necessary to understand how we close this structure, and much more importantly, to understand or to know who is above here at the top. There is somebody who controls these 13. Those 13 control the 300. The 300 control the think tank, which is the most influential group in the world, or organization. So be very attentive, subscribe, hit the bell so that you can get notified when the next video comes out. We're making these videos in English, which have been made in Spanish, and you will be notified of when these videos come out. With this, I say thank you. So with this, I say goodbye, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.